it up. That scares me because where's that money coming from? What, the underground?
Well, I mean, like what you were saying, basically the central banks can make it up, and it just creates more debt. It's just, more debt for everybody else. And then they get their money off the usury fees of it, interest rates. One of the big problems with debt over the last, say, 10 years is money. It's been so cheap for people. It's like, I remember when I was living in Calgary for a while, I was like, you open up a bank account. I was like, hey, you want $10,000? We'll give you it right now. You just put it right in your account. Don't worry about it. Don't worry, And that was like, in the early 2000s and stuff like that. And so, people, I'll get a house. And these bubbles going, and now we'll get some more property, and this is going up. And, it's like a big pyramid. Some people do well, but then other people, as we're seeing now, as things start to, get a little iffy and people are getting a little tighter and liquidity's tightening up, then, people will get caught in that pyramid, and people will get caught with, A, property that's not worth what they paid for it, or B, just like you were saying, just having huge amounts of debt that they have to pay large usury fees on. They have to pay a lot of interest. So like every month, instead of getting to keep $2,000, you've got $800 or $400 that is going to interest,
Well, I researched back around 2013, just around the bubble bursting time in this country. What was going on? And I'm not going to name the big bank, but they're out of England, their main branch, or their headquarters. They would purposely give people loans, knowing for a fact that these people couldn't carry the loan very long before they end up either going bankrupt or the house would be foreclosed on. The reason why they did that is that the prices of homes were going up drastically. So if they went out and give somebody a loan and they made their payments on their house for maybe a year or so, then they defaulted, right? And then it went into foreclosure. They made money right and left because then they turned around that property and then they resold it and made a hell of a lot of extra money. And that, I found that was going on, especially with this one bank. In fact, I talked to somebody who was involved in it, and that's what they were doing. They were looking for people that did not have good credit, that they knew that they could not support their loan amount each month. And they couldn't wait for them to foreclose, to stop making their payments before they could foreclose.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens is that, they'll just basically lower the standards or basically even get rid of any standards for loaning out money, where before it's like, you have to show proof of this and proof of that, and you have to have an income, and you have to have some assets, and, and then, it can devolve into the idea of just like, just anybody can get money. And like you were saying, it's almost like turning those people into renters for as long as they can hold on, and then kicking them out, and then putting the house on the market and reaping the appreciation.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess, that's been the name of the game, but, at least this company or bank got caught at it. Of course, they got hit with some heavy penalties, which really didn't really affect them because the amount of money they make, they came out like big time. Now, again, at the beginning of the show, we were talking about UFOs and stuff like that. Have you ever had an encounter with a UFO or with an alien or any thoughts being transferred back and forth from either?
Yeah, I've had a number of interesting sightings of things. From a UFO point of view, some of the more interesting ones I've seen is I've seen something around it was over Vancouver, basically coming into reality and showing itself, and then actually like moving out of reality. And like I said, we've actually seen the lights on a number of occasions. That was in the UK. We were in like central England, and we were walking along at night, and we were in a secluded lane, and we actually saw that light sort of come down and kind of go away from us and like fade out, almost like it would almost be like a extremely bright light that would leave like a little trail, for instance, as it went by. Your eye, it wasn't just a dot. It was so intense that it kind of left a little bit of a trail, or it did itself have a small trail. And And then also in our travels down into the Arizona, the Four Corners area, I've had some interesting experiences. I was explaining this one to somebody the other day. Is we're in an area called Secret Canyon, and when I go down there, I have a gentleman I know down there by the name of Tom Dongo in Sedona. And he's written a number of books, and he's kind of like the go-to guy for weird experiences. And the Four Corners area has quite a lot of high-energy spots, and there's a lot of strange goings-on down there. And we decided to go for a hike out to, well, we drove out there, and we went in this place called Secret Canyon. There's a number of canyons. And I went out there because there'd been a number of reports of sort of like men in black type of things, or soldiers in like unmarked black coveralls and stuff, and just strange goings on out there. And as we didn't really experience anything in there, and we were kind of like, oh, it's kind of interesting in here. And on our way back, we saw this strange bird, and it was like a bird, but it was like we're in the middle of like Sedona. It's like there's not many things flying around or birds. They kind of stand out. And then as we I looked at it, I was like, that's a big bird. That's just not like a normal bird. That's like a big eagle or something. And so I took my camera out, and I took a picture of it. And then later when the picture came out, it actually, in the film, it wasn't a bird, but off to the side you could see a halo of a saucer. And this is on 35 millimeter film, digital. And so you could actually see this in the picture very faintly, and almost like the picture inside the halo was like a more intense color and more intense. It was just slightly different. But then the distinct thing was the shape of the halo. It was off the side of the picture, and you could see it was like this very like a Billy Meyer kind of, like it was like at the top and then went to the edge and then came back in with like little ridges. And it was just like, and quite distinct, and it was just like bizarre, like very strange. So we have had a number of things. I've captured lots of orbs and that. And in the way of beings, I have had a couple of things I would call Men in Black encounters, where I've met very odd individuals, or I've had on one occasion I had an individual sort of standing there and then went to point to my wife and said, look at that odd person. And as we looked over, he was like gone, and there's no way he could have like run out of the picture or the frame or the area where we're looking. And then another one I just remembered was one time, and this was when I was taking the pictures, and my girlfriend at the time and a friend of hers and his girlfriend, we'd all traveled together to go over to Victoria, and we were standing at the inner harbor in Victoria, and they'd known that I was doing these weird pictures and strange things, and so we were talking about it, and the girls went off to look at something. They were looking in a shop window or something, and we were standing by the harbor looking at over the boats and stuff, and we looked up, and there was this plane flying over. And it wasn't really low. It was it was kind of low. But we looked at it, and suddenly we just realized that's a really odd-looking plane. It's like all white. There's no markings. There's no nothing. But it's like the whole thing's like totally white. And just as we turned around, the girl said, check this out. There's this plane flying. It's all white. We turned back, and the plane was gone. And, I mean, it was like kind of close in that sense that it wasn't going to fly out of your field of view in the time that we turned around and turned back. And we both ended up looking at each other going, like, that's weird. Like, that thing was right there, and it was all white, and now it's gone. So I've had a few things like that, of things sort of appearing, disappearing, like that. But I don't know about the... Oh, and I did have one, actually. Here's another one. And this is a classic saucer shot that I took. Was one time coming back from Victoria on one of the ferries. I was out on the deck, and I was looking, out, and it was really nice, and I thought I'd take some pictures out there. And I noticed some of the seagulls were coming in, and it was like kind of cool how they ride on the wind and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. It's like right there in front of you. And I went and took a picture of the seagull, and when I took a picture of the seagull, it was like, oh, like a normal picture. But then when I got the picture back, the bird looked normal, and everything looked normal, but just off of where the bird was and above it, was this classic saucer. No lights, no windows. Basically, it looked like a dull gray metal or browny bronze, more like a gray metal, round top, round bottom, edge. But the reason you could make it out is because the sun was out and how the sun was glinting off of it. And you basically had this perfect shape that was right there. And so that was probably one of the best sort of like, but it was a classic, like it looked like it was a spun metal dome, top and bottom, and made out of metal. It didn't have any lights, didn't have any windows, didn't glow. It actually did have, when you did blow it up, like you were mentioning Photoshop at the time, was some of my early pictures. I started playing around, I don't know, in the 2002, 2001 maybe. I got my first Mac and wanted to like basically document, like not document, what do you call it, archive photos digitally just in case, because I usually made different prints and I had sets and stuff because, you know, I didn't want to lose anything. And so when I was putting that one on there and I blew it up, or no, I think I did that one on a photocopier, a Canon color laser copier I had access to, and I put the photograph on there. That was it. We didn't do it on a computer. We did it on a photocopier, and we kept on blowing it up and up and up, just this saucer thing. And when you got it to a good, like, I don't know, it was about half an inch across in the biggest print, you could see that rippling effect around the outside of it. And that's one of the things I look for even today in UFO footage. I look for things that are like kind of plasma, or like plasma kind of things, like energy plasma, or that is the craft have like a rippling or like almost like a road, you know, like you see on the road in the summer. There's something going on around it energetically. It's just not like an object sitting in the sky, because a lot of the objects, like I said in a couple of my experiences, they actually, lack of a better term, they materialize and dematerialize. So this idea that the whole UFO thing is, you know, nuts and bolts and little men coming from Mars, or, you know, oh, how many beings are there? How a lot of it has to do with like an energetic thing, and like it's not almost like it's an energy as opposed to like just beings and civilizations and all kinds of things. It's almost like it's like a sci-fi kind of thing that could almost be anything in some aspects of it. I find John Keel used to talk about that, where, you know, these things could show up as one thing or show up as another thing, or, you know, transform or whatever. So it wasn't like they were like one particular thing. They could be like almost like a, I don't know, an energetic being that could transform itself or something like that.
Well, you know, I had an encounter, only one, back in the early, I can't even remember when. It would have been in the 70s. I was coming from, I took a job for a while in North Carolina, New Bern, and we were driving back, and we got into the desert of New Mexico, and it was nighttime, and all of a sudden it lit up. The inside of the car lit up, and all around the car lit up so bright that it literally hurt your eyes. And I pulled off the road. And at that time, if I remember right, they didn't have a speed limit. If they did, it was really crazy high. But I thought, well, gee, you know, it has to be a helicopter. You know, I'm getting pulled over, you know, for whatever I'm doing. And I pull off the side of the road, and I get out of the car. And the first thing I noticed, it was totally dead. Not a single sound. Nothing. It was so eerie. And I'm looking at this bright light, and probably within just a couple of seconds, it was gone, and without a sound. And I'll tell you, it was really one of the most scariest things I've ever, you know, encountered. I don't know if that was a UFO, if it was something military. I don't think it was military, because I was in the military. I know what helicopters sound like. Trust me. And it did not, and it was not a helicopter. I don't know what it was, but yeah, I'll tell you, it was the type of thing. It kind of like shook us up that night. And then I kind of forgot about it for many years till I started doing this show again. And naturally, right now, one of the hottest topics out there of anything is anything to do with aliens or UFOs.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's a very interesting subject.